Good afternoon, good evening, good morning. Um, I'm Utpala, and this is class 3 of Foundation Course 2 on Buddhist refuge. So before we get started, let's just take a few minutes to get in touch with uh, our motivation for being here in this class, for taking this course. Try to make it as heartfelt and as large as you can, as big as you can. What protection do you find in these teachings? And how can that protection benefit both yourself and others? And then, if you'd like, you can join me in reciting prayers. Make it a little bigger. Sangye Churan Soki Chuknam La Changchu Pardu Dakni Kyapsu Chi Daki Chishe Kipe Sanam Ki Jola Penshir Sangye Drupar So Sangye Churan Soki Chuknam La Changchu Pardu Dakni Kyapsu Chi Daki Chishe Kipe Sanam Ki Drola Benshir Sangye Drupar Sho Sangye Churan Soki Chukdam La Changchu Pardu Dakni Kyapsu Chi Daki Chishe Kipe Sanam Ki Chola Benshir Sangye Drupar Sho. Sashi Puki Chukshin Meto Trang Rirabling Shi Ninde Kempadi Sangye Shingdu Mikteu Warki Drokun Namdak Shingla Chupar Sho Idam Guru Ratna Mandala Kamniyatayo. So before we get started on class 3, which is we're turning away from refuge and turning towards the wish for enlightenment. So we're going to talk about that more deeply than we did in course one when we talked about the three principal paths. So before we do that, though, are there any questions from last week's classes? It's okay to have questions. Well, I know you're all, oh, you missed the second class. I'm sorry. Um, so I guess that you're all just so excited to dive into the wish for enlightenment, and I don't blame you. Okay. Where's my Tibetan? There you are. Sorry, those of you who've taken classes with me before, you know I'm a little bit Zoom share impaired. Okay, let's try this. There we go. Find the chat and bring you back over here so I can see you, some of you. Okay. So first we're going to start with the definition of the greater way or the Mahayana wish for enlightenment. And that's Semkye Pani Shendun Chir Yangdak Dzogpe Jangchu De. Please say Semkyepa Ni Shen low tone because it's that character. Shen Dun Chir Yangdak Dzogpe Jangchu De. So this is basically the whole presentation of bodhicitta in the jewel of realizations, right? We're working off the root text of what we're of this course's materials is the jewel of realizations by Maitreya. It's dictated to a sangha, right? And we're working, of course, off of a commentary by Kedrup Tempa Darge. So in our root text, in the jewel of realizations, this is basically it. That's all that Maitreya says about bodhicitta. But Kedrup does give us a little bit more. And we've got an excerpt of that in your reading for this week. This is the short definition of the greater ways wish for enlightenment. Semkye is one of the Tibetan phrases for the Sanskrit word bodhicitta. And it means to give rise to a thought. You can call it giving rise to the thought for enlightenment. Actually, the pa is what makes it giving rise to. Semkye is the wish. And then when you add a pa at the end of that, it turns it into giving rise to the wish. Ni means is. Shen dun shir. Shen means other. And dun shir means for the sake of. So for the sake of others. Young Dakpe Dzogpe Jangchup. You may recognize Jangchup, that's enlightenment. And Young Dak Dzogpe, that means total and complete. Total and complete. In Sanskrit, that's Samyak Sam. You may have heard of Samyak Sam Buddha, which means the totally enlightened, completely, totally enlightened Buddha. And de, in this spelling here, de, that means wish, to wish. So the greater way, or the Mahayana wish for enlightenment, and in Tibetan that is the Tekshen Semkye. Tekshen means Mahayana or greater way. Semkye is, as I said, the wish for enlightenment. So the greater way wish for enlightenment is that it's the wish to achieve total and complete enlightenment for the sake of others. So if someone asks you what the definition is, you can use that. This, however, this longer phrase here, which I'm just going to read for you, I won't make you say it. This is a more complete definition of the greater ways wish for enlightenment. And that is Shen Du Dundu Yang Dakpar Dzogbe Jang Chup Lamit Xing Rangi Drok Dzog Jang Dunyer Gi Dunpa Dang Sung Den Du Gyurpe Tekchen Lam Gi Jukgoi Tiksu Nepe Tekchen So Waiki Namrek Geparchen Tekchen Semke Kitseni. And today, what we're going to do is go over some of the words in this longer definition and talk about why those words are there. And hopefully, as we start to go through this, this will make some sense for you. You'll understand why it's important for us to look at this definition in more detail. The first question on your homework actually asks you uh, to write this longer definition, and you can find it in your reading. In English, it's on the second page of the reading for this week. It starts off with the definition of the greater ways wish for enlightenment is as follows. So with refuge was based on two elements, right? Does anyone remember what the two motivating factors are for taking refuge, for going for shelter? Being scared and hope. It's that for the hope, it's just good to remember. Thank you, by the way, Wanbu. It's important to remember that it's a hope that is it's like you have some hope that the one you're going to refuge to will be able to help you, right? So you're afraid, you're fearful of suffering, and you go to refuge to the three jewels because you have some hope that they can benefit you. And we talked a lot about that last week. So in a similar kind of way, the greater ways wish for enlightenment has two parts to it. It's called Dupon Nidensen. The mind is holding two wishes. So, very simply, as we said, it's the wish to gain total and complete enlightenment. That's one. And then the second part is we wish to do that for the benefit of all living beings. So now you may be wondering, why do I keep saying the greater ways wish for enlightenment? Isn't bodhicitta? Why do I need to say the greater ways wish for enlightenment? Isn't all bodhicitta part of the greater ways teachings? Isn't it all Mahayana? Mahayana bodhicitta, the greater ways wish for enlightenment. When we have that, and we'll talk more about this, but when we have it, that's when we become, shall we say, like a card-carrying member of the greater way. We become a bodhisattva when we have this wish, the greater ways wish. So, like, if we don't have genuine wish for enlightenment in our hearts, then we're really not Mahayana yet. If we have if we aspire to have the wish, we're not quite Mahayana yet. We want to become Mahayana. But that having that wish in our hearts, our minds, is when we become a follower of the greater way. So Semke, this phrase here, Tekchen Semke, is the greater way's wish for enlightenment. Semke by itself is just to generate the wish for enlightenment. There are, let me just say for a moment first. When we have Buddhist teachings, it's good to know what Buddhist philosophical school the teachings come from. And the Jewel of Realizations is a Svatantrika text, which that's a Sanskrit word, but we call it, we've translated that as the independent branch of the Middle Way school of philosophy. So there are 4 Buddhist schools. There's the detailists. That's where we find like the Abhidharma. There's the Sutrist school. That's where we find a lot of the logic texts, like the Pramanavartika. There's the mind-only school, and that's where we find the book that Word is working on, difficult points in the mind-only school. And then there's the 4th school is the Middle Way. And the Middle Way school has 2 distinct branches. There is some overlap between the schools otherwise, but there are 2 main branches. One is called the independent branch, and that's called the lower Middle Way. And then there is the consequence branch of the Middle Way, and that's Prasangika in Sanskrit. That's the higher school of the Middle Way and the highest school of all the schools of philosophy. So the hat we're wearing in this course is the independent branch of the Middle Way. And the main differences, the independent branch. Prasangika is we're going to get to that later in other courses, but this is from the independent branch of the Middle Way school's point of view. So why do I bring this up? Because there are 3 different enlightenments. According to the independent branch of the Middle Way, there are 3 tracks to reaching enlightenment. And each of those 3 tracks has a different goal, a different endpoint that a practitioner who's practicing that track wants to reach. Now, the progression on a track has 5 paths. And this is the same for all 3 tracks. And we're going to talk more about that when we meet again on Friday. But just briefly, it's accumulation, path of accumulation, path of preparation, path of seeing, path of habituation, and path of no more learning. So the names of these paths are the same for each track, but there are two distinct differences between these tracks on two of the steps. On the path of seeing and on the path of no more learning, which is basically the result of the path, the goal, reaching the goal. So the path of seeing, if you've taken courses with Geshe Michael Roach, and I think most of you have, and we've talked about this before, the path of seeing is the path where it starts with the direct perception of emptiness or selflessness. And the reason I say or selflessness is because two of the three tracks, I know this is really complicated, but I hope it's not too complicated. Two of the three tracks are their end goal is nirvana, the cessation of all mental afflictions in karma, escape from the wheel of suffering, escape from samsara, being in the state of an arhat. We did talk about this last time, I think, the difference between an arya, an arhat, and a Buddha. So two of the tracks lead to nirvana, and that's what they call enlightenment. The third track leads to complete and total Buddhahood. And that's the Mahayana path. And that's called enlightenment. So enlightenment can basically mean nirvana or Buddhahood. Why do we say three? Because there are two tracks that lead to nirvana. One is the first one is called they're called listeners, or the Sanskrit is Shravakas. These people, they're called listeners, or some people call them hearers. They hear the Mahayana teachings. They are able to pass them on correctly, but they don't practice them personally. Their motivation for bringing the teachings into their heart and into their lives is to escape from suffering themselves. So they're called listeners, and their enlightenment is called nirvana. The second track is called self-made Buddhas. And that Buddha is with a lowercase b. They're neither self-made nor Buddhas. So what does that mean? Self-made, some people have translated this Tibetan phrase, the Sanskrit phrase as solitary realizer, but that's not what the words mean. Self-made means that in this life they didn't have a teacher. In this life where they reached their highest goal, their enlightenment being nirvana, in this life they had no teacher. Does that mean they never had a teacher? No, it just means in this life they didn't have a teacher. They've been practicing for, probably millions of years, right? Or millions of lifetimes, I should say. And they had teachers in those lifetimes. But in this one, they just had a little bit left to do to reach their goal. They wanted a human rebirth, so they had all the, they had all the characteristics that are needed in order to practice the teachings well. So they're here, and they quickly reach their goal. So they're not really self-made if you look at their whole string of lifetimes. Just this lifetime, they didn't have a teacher. And then Buddha with a small b, because their goal is nirvana. It's not Buddhahood. Even though they're called that in Sanskrit. They Buddha means to awakened. They're awakened into a state that is outside of the realm of suffering. Awakened into the state of an arhat. And we're going to talk more about that as well. I can't remember if it's this week or next week, but it's coming. So, and then we have the Mahayana, the greater way, where the path leads to total and complete Buddhahood. The differences in the path of seeing are what selflessness, or the higher way, the greater way, calls it emptiness. But what absence of a self nature is it that the practitioner sees directly in meditation? If we look at the philosophical schools, they have different ideas of what emptiness or selflessness means. What does it mean to say that most importantly, most profoundly, to say that the self, me, Utpala, has no nature of its own? We're not going to get into detail of what the differences are. It's the book that I was fortunate to work on with Geshe Michael gets into what different schools, what they believe that selflessness or emptiness means. So if you have that book, you can get a lot of detail about that. But just to say that there are these 3 tracks, and they're like well known. It's not just that the independent branch of the middle way like made this up. the three tracks are well known in Buddhist literature. There's some debate about whether those whether those whether those three tracks are really three or if they're one. There's this story that, at least from the Mahayana point of view, right, that when an arhat is in nirvana without remainder, they no longer have this flesh and bone, this bag of bones. A Buddha comes and taps him on the shoulder and says, "Hey, this is pretty cool, right? This being totally free of suffering and having no negative emotions and no karma forcing you to experience suffering. It's really awesome, right? What about the billions and trillions of other living beings who are also suffering? Don't you care about them?" And they do it in a way much more eloquently than I just did. And then the arhat will go on to the Mahayana track. And apparently this happens with all of them. So in the Lam Rim, the steps on the path to enlightenment, it talks about these different motivations, right? We talked about the different scopes of practitioners, those wanting to they have a fear of birth in the lower realms, right? And they just want to have birth in the higher realms in the future. Then there's the ones who want to get completely free of the circle of suffering. And then the ones who want to reach Buddhahood in order to benefit all living beings. In the Lam Rim, it says that, everyone's going to have to go through the Mahayana paths. So you might as well start now. Why wait until you're an arhat and then because they have to start all over again for many different reasons. So anyway, just to be clear on this, what this class is talking about is the distinction between the goals of these three tracks: the track of the listeners, the track of the self-made Buddhas, and the track of the greater way. So now what we're going to do is pull out some important words from this longer definition and talk about why they're included, given our sort of grounding that the wish for enlightenment can apply to different goals, right? So what words within the greater ways definition of the wish for enlightenment make it distinct from the wish for enlightenment on the other tracks, the lower tracks? And I was going to read the English, and then I think I forgot to write it down. Let me just pull out. Let me just read to you the longer definition, and I'll read it slowly. So this is a definition of the greater way's wish for enlightenment. First, it is that main mental awareness belonging to the greater way, which is focused on achieving total enlightenment for the benefit of others, and which is matched with a state of mind that is associated with it, the aspiration to achieve total enlightenment. Secondly, it is a knowledge belonging to the greater way, which acts as a door for entering the greater way, or is something of the type, and which is included into the activity side of the standard division into the two of view and activity. We're going to talk mainly about that first sentence today. So first, it is that main mental awareness belonging to the greater way, which is focused on achieving total enlightenment for the benefit of others, and which is matched with a state of mind that is associated with it, namely the aspiration or the wish to achieve total enlightenment. So it's those two parts that I was talking about just a minute ago. The part of wanting to reach total enlightenment, and then also the part of wanting to reach total enlightenment for the benefit of all living beings. So the first thing to talk about is, why does the definition have the word main? In Tibetan, that's soul. Soul. Main mental awareness. Sometimes you'll see it as main mind. There's a study of perception. Within the study of perception, there's a discussion of main mind, which is awareness, and mental factors. Things like love or jealousy or pride, or the different it's like main mind is always on. It's awareness. And then the mental functions are the thoughts or emotions in the mind. And different schools have different numbers. I think the mind only school has the most comprehensive list at 52 or 53, I can't remember. But Word's book has them listed. in an appendix, his book on the mind-only school. So the important thing here, the word main means that bodhicitta, the wish for enlightenment, is awareness. It's a mental awareness, which is odd, right? Because usually awareness, when you talk about main mind, it's usually not talked about in terms of what is in the mind. Those are the mental functions. Then you talk about things like love. So it's a curious thing of why this word main is in this definition. And it's something that I personally think we might not truly understand until we ourselves, when we're on the bodhisattva path, when we have bodhicitta in our minds, in our hearts, and we see emptiness directly. And we start on the bodhisattva paths. There's 10 more paths, but we won't get into that. I don't want to confuse people. Levels, they're called levels, not paths. One of the explanations for why this definition talks about bodhicitta being main mind, main mental awareness, is that bodhicitta has those two parts. It has the part about wanting to reach total enlightenment, and it has the part about wanting to reach total enlightenment for the benefit of all others. In logic, we learn that the mind can only hold one object at a time. A mind can't hold two objects at a time, or 100 for that matter. That we have the perception of, like, I've got a computer monitor, it's sitting on a desk, I see all of you. It feels to me, my experience is of being aware of visual things and sounds and smells and tactile sensations. It feels like all these things are going on at the same time in my experience. But in any single instant of the mind, there's only one object that the mind holds. So the difficulty comes when you talk about holding bodhicitta. You can't have two thoughts, two wishes going on at the same time. So the way they talk about, the way that the Buddhists talk about this on the Mahayana scriptures, is that it's the main mind that's involved. The main mind holds these two wishes. Just as a personal aside, like if you took the meditation course with me and we talked about the different stages of meditation and that we want to reach the platform of single pointed concentration to see emptiness directly, to have a direct experience of emptiness, where our mind is stable, single pointed on one object. So we don't have any of the, no sounds, no tastes, no physical sensations. There's no sensation of being in a body even. It's just the mind is focused on the lack of a self nature to the self and to the exclusion of all else. It's like all the other awarenesses die away. So when you're in a direct perception of emptiness, how can you be thinking about bodhicitta, right? You cannot. They're two very different things. Emptiness is an absence. It's a lack of a way of existing. Bodhicitta is a positive thing, not like good and bad, but it's a wish, it's a desire, it's a hope. It's a motivation. So the Mahayanas had to, think about how do we say, how do we talk about how bodhicitta, how the wish for enlightenment, that motivation makes the direct perception of emptiness act as a cause for become totally and completely enlightened. If the mind can only hold one object at a time, and that object would be the absence of self-existence. So this is what they came up with. Now, I say came up with. I have not had a direct perception of emptiness with a mind imbued with bodhicitta. So I don't know what that feels like. So that's why I say we'll find out when we get there, what this means. And until then, we can try and mentally work through how it makes sense. But this is what Maitreya says. This is what he's a realized being, and this is what he says. So it's one of those things that is difficult to understand, but this is our wrong loop. That means this is how our system of thought deals with it. And by wrong loop here, this means that both schools, all three schools that are on the Mahayana path, mind only, independent branch of the middle way, and consequence branch of the middle way, they all agree on this point. So the so bodhicitta here, by the use of the word main, means that it's not a mental function like love or hope or jealousy or hatred. There are a lot more words we're going to talk about, but this is, I think, the most challenging thing. Uh, there is in the study of mind and mental functions, there's talk of 5 mental functions that are always present in the mind. And it has to do with how awareness, just naked, pure awareness, experiences objects. So there's things like attention. That's a mental function that is always present. So there's 5 of those. And I think when the word matched in the definition, that the main mind is matched with the wish to attain total and complete enlightenment for the benefit of all living beings, that somehow it's involved, although you're not perceiving it. So maybe I'm all wrong. I haven't had in-depth study on the mind and mental functions. It's on my wish list, but I'm getting old, so I have to find someone to teach me mind and mental functions. Okay, so main mind. Bodhicitta is main mind. And it's the word main is used to deal with the problem of, how many objects can the mind be focused on at a time. The second important phrase here is yikinamrik, which is mental awareness. Mental awareness. Now, when normally when we talk about the wish for enlightenment, we are thinking of it as a mental event, if you will. It's a mental thing. So why would we need to call out that it's a mental awareness? Isn't that obvious? It's not a tactile sensation. It's not a sound. It's not a smell. We have to use the phrase mental awareness because Buddhas have this, one of the extraordinary features of an awakened being, totally awakened being, is that they experience all objects with all of their sense consciousnesses, all of their sense awarenesses. So they can smell songs. They can hear touch, for example. They can feel love, although we talk about normally feeling love, but like physical feeling love, not sex. I'm not talking about sex. I'm talking about love. The physical feeling, like with their big toe or something. So because Buddhas can, they experience all objects of the past, the present, and the future, all existing objects, freshly in each instant. And they're experiencing all objects with all of their senses. I mean, wow. It's just really quite amazing what this kind of being. It's really challenging to think about, but it's like it's almost like a fantasy sort of, science fiction sort of thing. It's just so beyond my experience. I really look forward to that one in particular. Perceiving all existing objects of the past, present, and future in each instant. Like, what is that like? Much less experiencing it with all of my different senses. What does a song taste like? I'm looking forward to that. So, to the use of the word mental awareness is to exclude that possibility. So, we're not talking about, for example, the ear consciousness of a Buddha having bodhicitta. We're talking about the main mind or the main mental consciousness. The next phrase to talk about is Sokpe Jangchu. Sokpe Jangchu. And that means total enlightenment, right? So this is because of the fact that there are three different enlightenments that the word bodhicitta could refer to, right? Could be involved with, could be wishing for. So this is to just make it clear that the greater ways wish for enlightenment is talking about total enlightenment, not nirvana. And when we study these three different enlightenments, it's important to explore what the differences are, right? I mean, these aren't like just some scholarly things in a book. We're going for refuge to to be able to reach some goal, right? We can't reach any of these goals without refuge, without taking refuge in the three jewels. So why? What's our motivation? So it would be important for us to be clear in our motivation and not just read some words from a book, but to understand, oh, like, oh, I've heard that that Paris is a really lovely city and I'd like to go there. But if I don't know anything about Paris, other than it's a lovely city, has some great art, good jazz, good coffee, good bread. If I don't know anything about it, I won't have a strong desire to go there. So we should study and learn about what are these goals and what are the differences between these goals so that we cultivate a strong and clear motivation. Okay. The phrase shendun, for the benefit of others. Why is that necessary? It's basically another way of eliminating those two other kinds of enlightenment. Because the goal of reaching nirvana of a listener and of a self-made Buddha is for their own personal benefit. Whereas greater vehicles motivation is for the benefit of all living beings, to be able to benefit them. And then the last phrase we're going to talk about is Tekchen, greater way. So how would somebody be confused about what this wish for enlightenment is if we didn't include the phrase belonging to the greater way? So is there any wish for enlightenment that's looking to reach total and complete Buddhahood for the benefit of others that's not Mahayana? Why do we also need to include this phrase, the greater way? We're going to talk about this more next time, but there is, remember I said at the beginning of class that when we have genuine bodhicitta, greater way bodhicitta, Mahayana bodhicitta, it's at that point we become a greater way practitioner. There's another kind of bodhicitta. There's many ways of dividing bodhicitta, but this division is between genuine and artificial. artificial wish for enlightenment, it doesn't really mean fake, but it means that, because we're approximating bodhicitta. Another, I guess you might likes to call it sugarcane bodhicitta. If you've ever had sugarcane, it's a plant that, of course, it tastes like sugar, but it's like bamboo. If you cut open bamboo, it's hollow in the center, right? Sugarcane is also hollow in the center. So it tastes sweet, but it's hollow. It's a bodhicitta that approximates genuine bodhicitta. It's the bodhicitta that, if you're like me, it's the one you have to bring up in your mind. Like, you need to, with conscious awareness, you have to think about something that awakens this desire to become fully enlightened in order to benefit all living beings. You have to, in a way, like, force that wish into your mind. You have to call it into your mind. Like I use certain examples in the world to really give rise to this strong experience of wanting to reach full enlightenment in order to benefit all living beings. Like, I think about poverty, I think about starvation, I think about mothers whose children die in their arms. I think about people getting shot in the face. I think about sufferings that remind me that we're all in this situation of living a suffering life. And I want to help them all, and the only way I can do so is by becoming fully enlightened. So I go through those thought processes to give rise to this artificial bodhicitta, because it's not in my mind and heart in every moment of the day, which, like, similar to renunciation, that's what is going on with genuine bodhicitta. A person who has the genuine wish has that going on 24 hours a day, has it going on with everything they do, every person they meet, every animal they come into contact with, every insect, every bee that stings them, every red ant that bites them. Every time they, like, touch a glass to take a sip of water. They do so not for themselves, but to reach total and complete enlightenment so that they can benefit others. May all beings have refreshing water to soothe their throats. They turn everything into an activity towards that motivation all the time. So the reason that greater way is in the definition is to exclude this sugarcane bodhicitta, this artificial bodhicitta. So it's still like artificial bodhicitta still has all the other bits, right? It's still main mind, mental awareness. It's still wanting to reach total and complete Buddhahood. It's still wanting to do so for the benefit of all living beings. It's just that it needs to be called up, needs to be remembered. It's not present always. The great way starts, like I said, when we have genuine bodhicitta. So that's all the material for this class. And I'm happy to answer any questions. I see there's one in the chat here. For what reasons do arhats need to start over? Why not just continue? My understanding is that they need to I just taught the course on the Bodhisattva vows, and we talked a lot about the kind of seeds we need to plant in order to become a fully enlightened being. It's a tremendous amount of karma that we need to create. They call it the two collections of activity and wisdom. So they need to come back and do the work. They need to do the activities. They need to create that kind of karma in order to reach that, amazing state of being fully enlightened. Omniscience is not an inexpensive experience, karmically speaking. It takes a huge amount of seeds in order to have omniscience. In order to, just think about what Buddhists do. They manifest in myriad ways, in variety of ways, without, spontaneously, without conscious thought, to benefit beings. That their motivation was so strong, and the activities that they did with that motivation, both, activities as well as the wisdom in understanding the nature of reality, is so strong that it allowed them to manifest in countless forms to help beings all over the galaxies. Not to mention omniscience. Oh my gosh, seeing all things of all times in every instant. That's an experience, beyond what I can describe or even think of, really. to manifest paradise, to manifest all the different aspects of the Buddha's, of an enlightened being's body and mind. It takes a lot of work, a lot of work. So the arhats have to come back and do it again with, with the Mahayana teachings, creating much more powerful seeds. I hope that was helpful. There any other questions?
Спасибо.
Possible.
Спасибо.
I think I know that word. Asiba. Is that like thank you? So did anyone have a trouble with, main mind being what holds bodhicitta? When Geshe Michael taught this class, there was like a ruckus amongst the students. No, it can't be main mind. It's gotta be a mental function. I do really look forward to having the experience so that I can, talk about it with more than just words, have something behind what it is that I'm saying. Okay, well, if there's no questions, let's quickly dedicate before we get on to the next part of our day or night so that our time here together, the effort, the seeds that we've spent uh, on this class are pretty huge. Quite a good number of seeds. And so let's plant more and dedicate it towards reaching total and complete and perfect enlightenment for the benefit of all living beings. Sashi Buki Jukshin Meto Tram Rira Blingshin Yende Gempadi Sange Shingdu Mikte Uwargi Tokun Namdak Shingla Juparsho Idam Guru Ratna Mandalakam Niryataya Abhi. Kewa di kewoku. Sunam yeshe tsoksok shin. Sunam yeshe lejungwe. Dampar kuni topar sho. Thank you for your practice. Thank you for your interest. Thank you for all the service and love you present with others in your world. Thank you, live translators, without whom none of this would be possible. Thank you, Zoom. Thank you, Internet. Thank you, Geshe Michael. May you have a marvelous couple of days. And I look forward to seeing you again on Friday. Thank you.
Thank you, dear teacher. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Наши благодарности.
Большое спасибо.
You're probably also thanking me for ending early and not late. Okay, see you on Friday.
Thank you. See you later.